While millions study Plato and Aristotle in universities worldwide, there's a parallel intellectual tradition that was systematically erased from academic curricula. When Roman soldiers torched Alexandria's great library in 391 CE, they weren't just destroying scrolls, they were eliminating texts that contained operational principles for understanding reality's fundamental mechanics. The Vatican's Index Librorum Prohibitorum banned these works for centuries. Medieval alchemists faced execution for possessing them. Why? Because these weren't philosophical theories, they were instruction manuals. The surviving fragments trace back to Thoth, known to Greeks as Hermes Trismegistus, whose attributed writings predate Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam by millennia. Today, quantum physicists are rediscovering principles these texts described thousands of years ago: consciousness affecting matter, reality's holographic nature, the observer effect. These weren't religious doctrines requiring faith. They were precise descriptions of how existence operates at its deepest levels, knowledge considered too dangerous for public consumption. You're about to discover why entire civilizations work to bury this understanding, and why modern science is finally catching up to ancient wisdom. Most people live their entire lives like pinballs in a cosmic arcade machine, bouncing randomly from one experience to another, never understanding that the game has rules. They react to circumstances, get swept up in emotions, and wonder why life feels so chaotic and unpredictable. But what if I told you that reality operates according to 7 precise, unchanging laws, and once you understand these laws, everything changes? The ancient Hermetic masters didn't just stumble upon philosophical concepts. They discovered the actual operating system of existence itself. These 7 principles aren't mystical mumbo-jumbo. They're the fundamental mechanics that govern every single thing you experience, from your morning coffee getting cold to the rise and fall of civilizations. Let's start with the most radical principle of all: mentalism. The all is mental. These 4 words completely shatter the materialist worldview that's been drilled into us since childhood. This principle suggests that reality itself is consciousness-based, not purely material. Before you dismiss this as New Age fantasy, consider what's happening right now in quantum mechanics laboratories around the world. Physicists are discovering that observation literally affects reality at the subatomic level. The famous double-slit experiment shows that particles behave differently when they're being watched versus when they're not. Matter itself seems to respond to consciousness. Werner Heisenberg, one of the founders of quantum mechanics, said it perfectly: what we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. But here's where it gets practical. If reality is fundamentally mental, then your thoughts aren't just random chatter in your head, they're creative forces. The Hermetic masters understood that changing your mental state literally changes your experience of reality. This isn't positive thinking nonsense. This is about recognizing that consciousness and reality are intimately connected at the deepest level. The second principle, correspondence, gives us the famous axiom, as above, so below. This reveals that patterns repeat across every scale of existence. Look at an atom, electrons orbiting a nucleus. Look at our solar system, planets orbiting the sun, the same pattern, different scales. Your personal relationships mirror universal dynamics. The conflicts in your family echo the tensions between nations. The growth cycles in your garden reflect the expansion and contraction of galaxies. Once you see correspondence, you start recognizing that studying any level of reality gives you insights into all other levels. Having trouble with authority figures? At work? Look at how you relate to authority within yourself. That internal critic, those limiting beliefs. The external pattern reflects the internal one. Change one, and you change the other. The third principle, vibration, states that everything is in constant motion and frequency. Nothing is truly solid or static. Modern physics confirms this completely. What we perceive as solid matter is actually energy vibrating at specific frequencies. But the Hermetic masters took this further. They understood that thoughts, emotions, and even circumstances have vibrational qualities. You've experienced this directly, even if you didn't recognize it. Walk into a room where people just had a heated argument. You can feel the tension, the heavy vibration. Spend time with someone genuinely joyful, and their high vibration affects yours. Depression has a low, dense vibration. Anger vibrates faster but chaotically. Love vibrates at an entirely different frequency altogether. Understanding vibration means you can consciously shift your frequency through music, breathing, movement, or even the company you keep. You're not stuck with whatever vibrational state you happen to find yourself in. Polarity, the fourth principle, reveals that everything has its opposite, but these opposites are actually different degrees of the same thing. Hot and cold are both temperature. Love and hate are both intense emotional engagement. Indifference is actually their opposite. Rich and poor are both relationships to money. This principle is liberating because it means you're never truly stuck. If you're experiencing one pole of something, the other pole exists within the same system. Feeling powerless? The capacity for empowerment exists on the same spectrum. The Hermetic masters called this mental transmutation, consciously moving along the spectrum from one pole toward its opposite. The fifth principle, rhythm, shows us that everything flows in cycles. Tides, seasons, civilizations, personal, moods, economic markets, everything has its rhythm of expansion and contraction, rise and fall. Most people get caught off guard by these natural rhythms, but once you understand this principle, you can prepare for and work with the cycles instead of being victimized by them. When you're in a high period, you know it won't last forever, so you prepare for the inevitable downturn. When you're in a low period, you know it's temporary and you can position yourself for the coming upswing. The applications of this principle for timing major life decisions and investments are so powerful that I share specific techniques in our Insights Academy newsletter, along with a free copy of the complete Kybalion for deeper study. Cause and effect, the sixth principle, states that nothing happens by chance. Every effect has its cause, and every cause produces its effect. This isn't fatalism, it's empowerment. If everything happens according to cause and effect, then you can become a conscious cause instead of merely an effect. Most people live as effects, reacting to circumstances, blaming external conditions for their problems. But when you understand this principle, you start asking different questions. Instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "What did I do to create this situation?" This shift from victim to creator changes everything. The seventh principle, gender, recognizes that masculine and feminine principles operate in all creation. Not biological gender, but the fundamental creative forces. The masculine principle is active, focused, penetrating. The feminine principle is receptive, nurturing, gestating. Every creative act requires both principles working together. In your own life, you need both principles functioning. The masculine to set goals, make decisions, take action. The feminine to receive inspiration, nurture ideas, allow things to develop naturally. Most people are overdeveloped in one principle and underdeveloped in the other, creating imbalance and struggle. These 7 principles work together as a complete system for understanding and working with reality. They're not separate laws, but different aspects of how existence operates. Master them, and you stop being a victim of circumstances. You become a conscious participant in the creation of your experience. The ancient Hermetic masters weren't just philosophers, they were practical magicians who understood how reality actually works. Now you have the same knowledge they guarded so carefully. The question is, what will you do with it? What if I told you that everything you've been taught about the nature of reality is backwards? Not just slightly off, but completely inverted from the truth that ancient Hermetic masters understood thousands of years ago. The mainstream scientific worldview insists that consciousness is nothing more than an accidental byproduct of brain chemistry. According to this materialist perspective, billions of years ago, dead matter somehow organized itself into increasingly complex arrangements until, voila, it became aware of itself. Your thoughts, emotions, and sense of self are supposedly just electrical impulses firing between neurons, no more significant than the chemical reactions in a car battery. But the Hermetic texts reveal something far more profound and revolutionary. Consciousness doesn't emerge from matter. Matter emerges from consciousness. This isn't just ancient philosophy or mystical speculation. This is the fundamental operating principle of reality itself, and understanding it changes everything about how you experience your life. The Emerald Tablet and other Hermetic documents describe what they call the All, a universal mind that serves as the foundation of all existence. Think of it this way. Imagine consciousness as an infinite ocean, and your individual mind as a wave on that ocean's surface. Each wave has its own unique shape and movement, yet it's made of the exact same substance as every other wave, and the ocean itself. You're not separate from this universal consciousness, you're a localized expression of it. This means your thoughts aren't just private mental chatter happening inside your skull. They're creative forces directly connected to the fabric of reality itself. When you truly grasp this principle, you begin to understand why the Hermetic masters were so careful about who they shared this knowledge with. It fundamentally shifts the power dynamic between you and everything you've been told controls your life. Consider the placebo effect, which modern medicine has documented extensively but struggles to explain within its materialist framework. Patients given sugar pills often experience real, measurable healing, not because the pills contain medicine, but because their belief in the treatment literally reorganizes their physical reality. Cancer tumors shrink, depression lifts, chronic pain disappears. The mind doesn't just influence the body, it shapes the very matter that composes it. Quantum physics has stumbled upon this same truth from a different angle. The famous double-slit experiment demonstrates that subatomic particles behave differently when they're being observed versus when they're not. The act of conscious observation literally determines whether a photon behaves as a wave or a particle. Reality at its most fundamental level responds to consciousness, not the other way around. But here's where it gets really interesting. Most people are unconsciously creating their experiences through habitual thought patterns they're completely unaware of. Someone who consistently thinks thoughts of scarcity and limitation will find their outer world reflecting those mental patterns back to them. They'll encounter financial struggles, relationship problems, and missed opportunities, not because they're unlucky, but because their consciousness is literally organizing their reality around those core beliefs. I've witnessed this principle in action countless times. A woman who spent decades believing she wasn't worthy of love suddenly shifts that internal pattern and finds herself surrounded by caring relationships. An entrepreneur who releases his deep-seated fear of failure starts seeing opportunities everywhere and experiences unprecedented success. These aren't coincidences, they're demonstrations of consciousness directly shaping experience. The ancient Hermetic texts explain that when you align your individual mind with the universal mind, you gain access to what they call divine power, the ability to consciously participate in the creation of your reality rather than being a victim of circumstances. This is why this knowledge was kept hidden. Imagine if everyone understood that their thoughts and beliefs were the primary creative forces in their lives. How many of our current institutions depend on people feeling powerless and dependent? The suppression of this understanding isn't accidental. Educational systems teach you to look outside yourself for authority and answers. Religious institutions position you as fundamentally flawed and in need of external salvation. Economic systems convince you that your value depends on what you can produce or consume. Political systems maintain that you need others to make decisions for you. All of these structures crumble when you realize that consciousness, your consciousness, is the ultimate creative force in your experience. Modern consciousness research is finally catching up to these ancient insights. Studies on meditation show that focused mental practices literally rewire brain structure. Research on intention and distant healing demonstrates that consciousness can influence physical systems across vast distances. Investigations into near-death experiences reveal that consciousness continues to function even when brain activity ceases. The implications are staggering. If reality is fundamentally mental rather than physical, then changing your mental patterns is the most direct way to change your life circumstances. This isn't positive thinking or wishful fantasy. It's applied metaphysics based on the deepest truths about how existence actually operates. Start paying attention to the connection between your dominant thought patterns and what shows up in your external world. Notice how your beliefs about what's possible for you seem to create a boundary around your experiences. Observe how your emotional states influence the kinds of people and situations you attract. The Hermetic masters understood that mind is the first and most fundamental principle of existence. Everything else, matter, energy, space, time, are secondary manifestations of consciousness organizing itself into experience. When you align with this truth, You stop being a victim of circumstances and become a conscious creator of your reality. This is your birthright, and now you know why they never wanted you to discover it. Look, when the ancient Hermetic masters wrote, "as above, so below," they weren't crafting some mystical poetry for meditation retreats. They were documenting the most fundamental pattern recognition system in existence, a precise mathematical principle that governs how reality constructs itself at every single level. Think about this for a moment. You've seen lightning split the sky in jagged, branching patterns, right? Now consider that the rivers carving through landscapes follow those exact same branching patterns. Your blood vessels? Identical structure. The neural networks firing in your brain right now as you process these words. Same pattern. The roots of trees, the cracks in dried mud, the tributaries of river deltas. It's the same blueprint repeating endlessly. This isn't coincidence. It's how reality builds itself using fractal geometry. The same patterns scaling up and down across every dimension of existence. Scientists today call it emergence, but the Hermetics understood this principle thousands of years ago and realized something modern science still struggles with. These patterns don't just appear in physical structures, they govern everything. Take atomic structure, electrons orbiting a nucleus in predictable patterns. Now zoom out to our solar system, planets orbiting the sun in those same mathematical relationships. Zoom out further to galaxies spinning in perfect spirals. Now zoom back down to a nautilus shell, DNA's double helix, or the spiral patterns of your fingerprints. The same mathematical constants, the same proportional relationships, the same underlying architecture. But here's where it gets really interesting, and why this knowledge was considered dangerous. These patterns don't stop at the physical level. They repeat in psychological, social, and experiential dimensions too. Ever notice how the relationship dynamics you struggle with in your romantic life often mirror the exact same patterns you experienced in your family growing up? That's not psychological theory, that's the mirror principle in action. The patterns established at one level of your experience replicate themselves at other levels until you consciously recognize and interrupt them. Your external environment right now is reflecting your internal state with startling precision. If your living space is chaotic and cluttered, I guarantee your mental state has that same quality. If your relationships are marked by drama and instability, look at your relationship with yourself. You'll find the same turbulence. If your finances are in constant crisis, examine your relationship with personal value and self-worth. The external circumstances aren't causing the internal state, they're reflecting it. This is why ancient astrology wasn't the superstitious nonsense it's been painted as. The original astrological systems were applications of the mirror principle, the understanding that celestial movements correspond to terrestrial events and individual psychological patterns, not because planets influence us, but because both operate according to the same underlying mathematical principles. The movements of celestial bodies reflect the same patterns playing out in human consciousness and earthly events. When you understand this principle, you can literally read reality like a book. You can examine one level of your experience to understand what's happening at completely different levels. Having trouble with authority figures at work? Look at your relationship with your own inner authority and decision-making process. Experiencing financial blocks? Examine where you're blocking the flow of energy and creativity in other areas of your life. Here's a practical example that will blow your mind. Take someone who constantly complains about living in a surveillance state where privacy is disappearing. 9 times out of 10, if you look at their personal relationships, you'll find they're either invasively monitoring others or desperately hiding aspects of themselves. The external political reality they're experiencing mirrors their internal relationship with transparency and boundaries. This principle explains why healing one area of your life often spontaneously improves others without any direct intervention. Work on healing your relationship with your father, and suddenly your relationship with money shifts. Clear emotional blocks around expressing creativity, and your physical health improves. It's not magic, it's pattern recognition and systemic change. The mirror principle also explains synchronicities, those meaningful coincidences that seem too perfect to be random. They're not random. They're expressions of underlying pattern connections that become visible when you know how to look. When you're internally aligned with a particular frequency or pattern, reality reflects that alignment back to you through external circumstances, encounters, and opportunities. This is why working with symbolic representations can create real-world changes. Vision boards, ritual work, creative visualization, these aren't New Age wishful thinking. They're applications of the mirror principle. When you consciously work with patterns and symbols at one level, those changes ripple through the corresponding levels of reality. But here's the key most people miss. This works both ways. Just as internal changes create external shifts, you can create internal changes by consciously altering external patterns. Change your physical environment, and your mental state shifts. Change your daily routines, and your emotional patterns evolve. Change how you move your body, and your thought patterns transform. The reason this knowledge was suppressed is obvious once you see it. When you understand the mirror principle, you stop being a passive victim of circumstances and become an active reader of reality's deeper intelligence. You can decode the messages your life is constantly sending you. You can identify unconscious patterns by observing their external manifestations. You can create change at one level to influence others. Most people stumble through life wondering why the same patterns keep repeating, the same relationship problems, the same career obstacles, the same financial struggles. They're looking for external solutions to what are actually pattern problems. The mirror principle shows you that changing the pattern at any level changes it at every level. This is why mastering Hermetic principles was considered the ultimate education. It teaches you to read the hidden language reality uses to communicate with itself and with you. Now we get to the heart of what they've been hiding from you, the secret that changes everything about how you interact with reality itself. The ancient Hermetic masters called it the principle of vibration, and it's arguably the most practical and immediately transformative of all 7 principles. Here's what it states: nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. Think about this for a moment. What appears solid around you, your chair, the walls, your own body, is actually energy in constant motion. This isn't mystical speculation anymore. Einstein proved it with E equals mc squared, showing us that matter and energy are just different expressions of the same fundamental reality. That solid chair you're sitting on? It's mostly empty space with particles vibrating at specific frequencies, creating the illusion of solidity. But here's where it gets fascinating. Quantum mechanics has revealed that these particles aren't even solid objects. They're probability waves, existing in multiple states until observed. And string theory suggests that at the most fundamental level, reality consists of tiny vibrating strings, each creating different particles based on their vibrational frequency. The ancient Hermetic masters somehow knew this thousands of years ago. What this means for your daily life is revolutionary. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every word you speak carries its own vibrational frequency. You're not just observing reality, you're actively participating in its creation through your vibrational state. This is why 2 people can experience the exact same situation completely differently. They're literally tuned to different frequencies. I've seen this principle work in ways that would astound you. A friend of mine was struggling with chronic anxiety, feeling stuck in patterns that seemed impossible to break. Once she understood that anxiety wasn't just a mental state, but an actual vibrational frequency, everything changed. She started working consciously with her vibration through breathwork and movement, and within weeks, different opportunities began appearing in her life. Same person, same circumstances, but operating at a completely different frequency. This is how emotions actually work. They're not just feelings, they're vibrational states that literally attract similar frequencies from your environment. When you're vibrating at the frequency of gratitude, you notice more things to be grateful for. When you're stuck in fear, fearful situations seem to multiply. It's not coincidence, it's physics. Music demonstrates this principle perfectly. A single song can instantly shift your entire emotional state because sound is pure vibration. Those frequencies literally reorganize your cellular structure, changing your brain chemistry within seconds. This is why certain music makes you feel energized while other frequencies drain you. Your body is responding to vibrational information. People work the same way. You know how being around certain individuals leaves you feeling depleted while others energize you? That's vibrational resonance in action. Each person carries a dominant frequency, and when you spend time together, your vibrations either harmonize or clash. This explains why some relationships feel effortless while others require constant work. You're either in vibrational alignment or you're not. Environments carry distinct vibrational signatures too. Walk into an old cathedral and you feel the accumulated vibrations of centuries of prayer and contemplation. Enter a hospital and you immediately sense the frequencies of healing and suffering that permeate the space. Your body picks up these subtle energetic signatures instantly, often before your conscious mind registers anything. The principle of resonance explains why like attracts like on every level. Similar vibrations amplify each other, which is why people with similar mindsets tend to find each other, why certain opportunities appear when you're vibrating at the right frequency, and why changing your internal state changes your external circumstances. But here's what they don't want you to understand. You can consciously control your vibrational frequency. You're not at the mercy of random emotions or circumstances. Through specific practices, you can tune yourself like a radio to whatever frequency you choose. Breathwork is one of the most immediate ways to shift your vibration. Your breath directly influences your nervous system, and your nervous system determines your vibrational state. Slow, deep breathing activates parasympathetic responses, raising your frequency. Rapid, shallow breathing keeps you trapped in lower vibrational states of stress and fear. Movement changes your vibration instantly. When you're stuck in mental loops, physical movement literally shakes up your energy patterns. Dancing, walking in nature, even simple stretching can shift you out of stuck frequencies and into flow states. Sound and visualization work directly with vibrational principles. Humming, chanting, or listening to specific frequencies can retune your entire system. Visualization works because your nervous system can't distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and real ones. Both create the same vibrational patterns in your body. Different emotional states correspond to measurable frequencies. Shame and guilt vibrate at around 20-30 hertzes, while love and joy resonate at 500 hertzes and above. This isn't metaphor. These are actual measurable frequencies that affect every cell in your body. Understanding this gives you a practical map for emotional navigation. This knowledge was suppressed because it reveals something revolutionary. You don't need external circumstances to change before you can feel different. You can change your vibrational frequency first, and then watch as your external reality reorganizes itself to match your new frequency. This makes you independent of systems designed to keep you dependent on external validation and control. Want to start working with these principles immediately? Begin by paying attention to what raises or lowers your energy throughout the day. Notice which thoughts, people, environments, and activities increase your vibrational frequency and which ones drain it. Then consciously choose more of what raises your vibration and less of what lowers it. The Hermetic masters understood that reality responds to vibrational commands. When you master your own frequency, you master your experience of reality itself. This isn't about positive thinking, it's about understanding the fundamental physics of consciousness and learning to work with it intentionally. Your vibration is your vote for the kind of reality you want to experience. Every moment, you're broadcasting a frequency that the universe is responding to with mathematical precision. Once you truly grasp this, you'll never see yourself as a victim of circumstances again. Now we come to perhaps the most practically powerful principle in the entire Emerald Tablet, one that literally hands you the keys to transforming any experience you're having. The ancient Hermetic masters called it the principle of polarity, and understanding it changes everything about how you navigate reality. Here's what blew my mind when I first grasped this. What we perceive as opposites aren't actually separate things at all. They're two ends of the same spectrum, different degrees of the same phenomenon. Think about hot and cold. We treat them like they're completely different, but they're both just measurements of temperature. There's no point where hot suddenly becomes cold. It's one continuous scale. The Hermetic texts state this explicitly. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. But here's the kicker. These opposites are identical in nature, differing only in degree. This isn't just philosophical wordplay. This is a fundamental law of how reality operates. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let me give you some examples that will shift how you think about your entire life. Love and hate. We think they're opposites, right? But watch what happens when you examine them closely. Both love and hate are intense emotional engagement with someone or something. The true opposite of both love and hate is indifference, not caring at all. When someone says, "I hate you," after a breakup, they're still deeply engaged. The energy is still flowing. It's when they stop caring entirely that the connection truly dies. This reveals something profound. Love and hate exist on the same spectrum of emotional engagement. And if they're on the same spectrum, you can move between them. You can transform one into the other because they're made of the same essential energy. Consider courage and fear. We're taught they're opposites, but look deeper. Both courage and fear involve facing the unknown, confronting something uncertain. The person who never encounters anything that challenges them experiences neither courage nor fear. They live in complacency. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's fear transformed, moved along the spectrum toward a different expression of the same energy that recognizes the unknown as opportunity rather than threat. Here's where this gets really practical. Wealth and poverty aren't opposites. They're both relationships with money, both forms of engagement with financial energy. The true opposite of both wealth and poverty is financial irrelevance, living in a system where money doesn't exist at all. But within our reality, wealth and poverty are different positions on the same spectrum of financial relationship. This principle reveals something the ancient texts considered dangerous knowledge. You can consciously move along these spectrums. You can transform any experience by understanding its polar nature and deliberately shifting your position. Take depression and joy. Modern psychology treats them as separate conditions requiring different approaches, but the Hermetic understanding shows they're both emotional states on the same continuum of feeling. Depression isn't the absence of joy. It's joy inverted, the same life energy turned inward and downward instead of outward and upward. When you understand this, transformation becomes possible because you're not trying to create something from nothing. You're redirecting energy that's already there. I've seen this work in my own life in ways that seemed impossible before I understood polarity. That crushing anxiety before a big presentation. It's the exact same energy as excitement, rapid heartbeat, heightened awareness, intense focus. The only difference is the story I'm telling myself about what that energy means. When I consciously shift from something terrible might happen to something amazing might happen, I'm moving along the spectrum from fear to excitement, using the same underlying energy. This is what the Hermetics called mental transmutation, the ability to change unwanted mental states into desired ones through understanding their polar relationship. You're not fighting against your experience, you're working with the natural laws that govern it. This principle revolutionizes how you understand relationships too. Most conflicts happen because people are operating at different poles of the same spectrum without realizing it. One person's need for security might clash with another's need for freedom, but security and freedom aren't true opposites. They're both expressions of the desire for control over one's environment. When you find the underlying principle they share, resolution becomes possible. The victim and victor mentality work the same way. Both are positions on the spectrum of personal empowerment. The victim says, "Things happen to me." The victor says, "I make things happen," but they're both engaged with the question of personal agency. The true opposite of both would be complete unconsciousness, never even considering the relationship between yourself and your circumstances. Understanding polarity prevents you from getting trapped in fixed positions. Instead of thinking, "I am depressed" or "I am anxious," you start thinking, "I am currently experiencing the depressive pole of the emotional spectrum," or "I am currently at the fear end of the courage-fear continuum." This shift in language reflects a shift in understanding. You're not stuck in a state. You're visiting a position on a spectrum you can navigate. Here's why this knowledge was considered so dangerous it had to be hidden. It shows people how to transform any experience rather than being victimized by circumstances. When you understand that every challenging state has a polar opposite made of the same energy, you realize you're never truly powerless. You always have the option to consciously move along the spectrum. The key is recognizing that transformation isn't about eliminating unwanted experiences. It's about understanding their polar nature and consciously shifting your position. You don't destroy fear, you transform it into excitement. You don't eliminate anger, you redirect it into passionate action for positive change. This is real power, not the ability to control external circumstances, but the ability to consciously navigate between different states of being and experience. When you master polarity, You become the conscious director of your internal reality, and as we learned from the previous principles, that internal reality shapes everything you experience. The ancient Hermetic masters understood something we're just rediscovering. Reality is far more fluid and responsive than we've been taught to believe. Every experience contains within it the seed of its opposite, and conscious awareness is the key that unlocks transformation. Looking at our journey through vibration and polarity, we arrive at perhaps the most practical of all Hermetic principles, the principle of rhythm. While vibration showed us everything is energy and motion, and polarity revealed how opposites create reality, rhythm teaches us something profound. Everything flows in cycles, and understanding these cycles is your key to flowing with life rather than constantly fighting against it. Think about the most obvious rhythms around you right now. Day follows night, seasons cycle through their eternal dance, tides ebb and flow with mathematical precision. Your own heartbeat, your breathing, even your brain waves, everything pulses in rhythmic patterns. But here's what the Hermetic texts understood that modern society has forgotten. These visible rhythms are just the surface of a far deeper truth. Everything in existence moves in cycles, from the grandest cosmic movements down to the subtlest shifts in your emotional states, your energy levels, and even the opportunities that appear in your life. The ancient wisdom keepers didn't see life as a series of random events happening to them. They recognized life as an intricate symphony of rhythmic patterns, each one as predictable and workable as the phases of the moon. The Hermetic documents describe rhythm as the pendulum swing between polar opposites, and this is where our previous understanding of polarity becomes crucial. Remember how we learned that hot and cold are simply different degrees of the same thing? Rhythm shows us how reality moves between these poles in predictable cycles. Every period of expansion in your life is naturally followed by contraction. Times of intense activity give way to periods of rest and integration. Phases of rapid growth alternate with times of consolidation. The texts describe this as the breath of the universe itself, an eternal inhaling and exhaling that governs everything from the rise and fall of civilizations down to your personal creative cycles. Let me give you some examples that will probably hit close to home. Notice how your most creative periods are often followed by times when you feel less inspired, more reflective. This isn't a failure or a problem, it's the natural rhythm of creative energy. The expansion phase generates new ideas and projects, while the contraction phase allows you to integrate what you've learned and prepare for the next wave of creativity. Fighting this rhythm by trying to force constant creative output leads to burnout and diminished quality. The same pattern shows up in your social needs. You'll have periods where you crave connection, want to be around people, engage with the world. These naturally alternate with times when you need solitude, when you're drawn inward to process and recharge. Modern culture often pathologizes this natural rhythm, labeling people as inconsistent or antisocial when they honor their need for solitary phases. But understanding rhythm reveals this as perfectly natural and necessary. Your attention itself moves in cycles, periods of outward focus on external goals and achievements alternating with inward attention to personal growth and self-reflection. Career phases where you're building and expanding, followed by times of questioning and reassessment. Even your relationships move through rhythms of closeness and distance, intensity and ease. Here's where this knowledge becomes practically powerful. When you understand these rhythms, you stop fighting natural cycles and start working with them. Instead of forcing yourself to be creative when you're in a consolidation phase, you use that time for planning, organizing, or skill building. Instead of panicking when a relationship goes through a natural distance phase, you recognize it as part of a larger cycle and avoid creating unnecessary conflict. The Hermetic texts reveal that what most people experience as setbacks, failures, or problems are often simply natural parts of larger rhythmic cycles. That difficult period you went through last year? It might have been the contraction phase that preceded a major expansion in your life. That relationship challenge, that career setback, that health issue, viewed through the lens of rhythm. These events often reveal themselves as necessary parts of larger patterns leading to growth and new opportunities. But here's where modern society has led us astray, and this isn't accidental. Our entire economic system is built on the myth of constant upward growth. Businesses are expected to increase profits, Every quarter, individuals are pressured to constantly advance in their careers. Even personal development is sold as a straight line of continuous improvement. This forced linear thinking creates massive stress because it ignores the natural rhythmic cycles that govern all life. Think about how this plays out in your daily experience. You're told you should be productive all the time, social all the time, happy all the time. When you naturally cycle into lower energy periods, quieter phases, or times of introspection, you're made to feel like something's wrong with you. You're sold products and programs promising to eliminate these natural rhythms rather than work with them. The practical applications of understanding rhythm are profound. When you recognize your personal energy rhythms, you can schedule important meetings, creative work, or decision-making during your natural high-energy phases. You can plan rest and reflection during your lower energy periods instead of fighting them. This isn't about being lazy. It's about optimizing your effectiveness by working with your natural patterns rather than against them. In relationships, understanding rhythm prevents you from taking natural cycles personally. When your partner goes through a more distant or introspective phase, you recognize this as part of their natural rhythm rather than a rejection of you. When you cycle into a period of needing more space or independence, you can communicate this as a natural rhythm rather than a relationship problem. Even in business and financial decisions, those who understand larger rhythmic cycles have tremendous advantages. Economic markets, social trends, even technological adoption all move in predictable rhythmic patterns. The most successful investors and entrepreneurs aren't just lucky. They've learned to recognize these larger cycles and time their actions accordingly. But perhaps the most advanced application of the principle of rhythm involves learning what the Hermetic texts call neutralizing the swing of the pendulum. This means developing the ability to remain centered and stable in your consciousness, even while external circumstances fluctuate wildly. Instead of being emotionally dragged through every cycle, you learn to observe the rhythms while maintaining your inner equilibrium. This is why this knowledge was suppressed. When people understand natural rhythms, they become much harder to control and exploit. They stop buying products designed to fight natural cycles. They stop accepting jobs that demand constant availability and linear productivity. They start making decisions based on natural timing rather than artificial urgency created by others. Understanding rhythm isn't just about going with the flow. It's about recognizing that you are part of a vast, intelligent system of cycles that, when understood and honored, becomes your greatest ally in creating the life you actually want. The pendulum swings, but you don't have to swing with it. The cycles continue, but you can learn to dance with them rather than being dragged along. This is the mastery that the principle of rhythm offers, not control over the cycles themselves, but perfect harmony with the eternal dance of expansion and contraction that is life itself. Look around your life right now. Every single thing you see, every circumstance you're experiencing, every relationship you have, none of it happened by accident. Not one bit of it. What you're looking at is the precise mathematical result of causes you've been setting in motion, most of them without even realizing it. The ancient Hermetic masters understood something that would shake the foundations of how most people see reality. There is no such thing as chance. What we call coincidence, luck, or random events are simply effects whose causes we haven't recognized yet. It's like watching a movie and thinking the characters are making spontaneous decisions, when really every scene was scripted, filmed, and edited long before you sat down to watch. This is the principle of cause and effect, and it operates with the same precision whether you're aware of it or not. Just like gravity doesn't care if you understand physics before it pulls you toward the Earth, this principle doesn't require your belief to function. It's been running the show of your entire existence. And once you see how it works, you can never unsee it. Think about quantum mechanics for a moment. Scientists used to believe that subatomic particles behaved randomly, chaotically, without any underlying order. But the deeper they looked, the more they discovered that even apparent randomness follows precise probabilistic laws. What seemed like pure chance was actually operating according to mathematical principles we simply hadn't understood yet. The same pattern emerges in chaos theory. Systems that appear completely unpredictable actually follow underlying patterns and rules. Your life operates the same way. That job opportunity that seemed to come out of nowhere. Look back at the thoughts you've been thinking, the conversations you've been having, the actions you've been taking. over the past months. You'll find the breadcrumbs leading directly to that coincidental phone call, that relationship that ended seemingly without warning. Trace back through the emotional patterns, the unspoken resentments, the gradual shifts in energy that preceded the final blow-up. Here's where it gets really interesting, and why this knowledge was considered so dangerous. Causes set on one level create effects on completely different levels. A thought consistently held in your mind creates changes in your emotional state. Those emotional changes alter your behavior patterns. Your behavior patterns shift the kinds of people and opportunities you attract. Before you know it, a simple shift in thinking has restructured your entire external reality. I've watched this play out countless times. Someone starts genuinely believing they deserve better treatment, not just as a positive thinking exercise, but as a deep internal knowing. Within weeks, they're having different conversations. Within months, they're in different environments. Within a year, their whole social circle has upgraded. They didn't just think different thoughts, they became a different cause, setting entirely new effects in motion. This is why understanding polarity and rhythm, which we explored earlier, becomes so crucial. When you recognize that every mental state has its opposite available to you, and when you understand the rhythmic nature of how energy flows, you gain conscious control over the causes you're setting. You stop being a victim of unconscious causation and become a deliberate architect of your experience. But here's what trips most people up: the delay between cause and effect. Plant a seed today, and you don't get fruit tomorrow. The gap between setting a cause and experiencing its effect can span days, months, or even years, especially when you're working with mental and emotional causation. This delay creates the illusion that your thoughts and feelings don't really matter, that external circumstances are just happening to you randomly. The ancient concept of karma makes perfect sense through this lens. It's not some cosmic justice system keeping score of your good and bad deeds. It's simply the natural operation of cause and effect across time and multiple dimensions of reality. Every thought seeds future circumstances. Every emotional pattern attracts corresponding experiences. Every action ripples outward, creating waves that eventually circle back to you. This is precisely why this knowledge was suppressed and hidden. When you truly understand that you're always setting causes, that there are no victims, only unconscious participants, it completely eliminates the need for external saviors, authorities, or rescue systems. You can't blame your parents, your government, your boss, or your circumstances anymore. You become responsible for the reality you're experiencing. Most people find this terrifying at first because it means taking complete ownership of their lives. But then something extraordinary happens. You realize that if you've been unconsciously creating effects you don't like, you can consciously create effects you do want. The same principle that's been working against you can now work for you. Start paying attention to the causes you're setting right now. What thoughts are you feeding your mind consistently? What emotional states are you practicing daily? What actions are you taking that align with or contradict what you say you want? These aren't abstract philosophical questions. They're practical engineering problems with predictable solutions. When you catch yourself thinking "this always happens to me" or "I never get lucky breaks," you're actually observing your own causative patterns. Those statements aren't just descriptions of your experience, they're instructions to the universe about what to create next. You're literally programming future effects through present mental causes. The most powerful shift happens when you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "How did I participate in creating this?" Not from a place of self-blame, but from genuine curiosity about the causative mechanisms at work. This question transforms you from a passive recipient of random events into an active investigator of your own creative process. Every single moment, you're standing at the intersection of infinite possibilities, choosing which causes to set in motion next. The question isn't whether you have this power, you've been using it your entire life. The only question is whether you'll continue using it unconsciously or finally step into deliberate, conscious causation. The medieval alchemist hunched over his furnace wasn't really trying to turn lead into gold. He was engaged in something far more profound and far more dangerous to those in power. The real secret of alchemy wasn't about transforming metals, it was about transforming human consciousness itself. You see, the brilliant minds behind Hermetic alchemy faced a deadly problem. They possessed knowledge that could fundamentally alter how people understood themselves and reality. But openly teaching psychological and spiritual transformation would have meant persecution, imprisonment, or death at the hands of religious and political authorities who depended on keeping people spiritually unconscious. So they developed an ingenious code. They disguised the most profound teachings about consciousness transformation as metallurgical experiments. Lead wasn't really lead. It represented the heavy, dense state of ordinary awareness, weighed down by unconscious patterns, limiting beliefs, and reactive emotions. Gold wasn't really gold. It symbolized the illuminated state of awakened consciousness, where you operate from wisdom rather than programming. Every chemical process described in alchemical texts was actually a specific technique for inner transformation. When they wrote about heating substances in a crucible, they meant applying the fire of conscious attention to unconscious patterns. When they described distillation, they meant separating pure awareness from the contamination of conditioned thinking. The entire laboratory was a metaphor for the human psyche. This knowledge was literally hidden in plain sight. An alchemist could have his workshop raided, his texts examined, and appear to be pursuing nothing more threatening than material wealth. Meanwhile, initiates who understood the real meaning could study the most advanced consciousness transformation techniques ever developed. The alchemical process follows three primary stages that map directly onto psychological transformation. First comes nigredo, the blackening phase. This is what mystics call the dark night of the soul. It's when you first become conscious of your unconscious patterns, and it's deeply uncomfortable. You start seeing how your automatic reactions control you, how your beliefs limit you, how your emotional patterns sabotage you. Everything you thought you knew about yourself gets questioned. Most people try to avoid this phase, but it's absolutely necessary. You can't transform what you won't acknowledge. The nigredo forces you to face your shadow, all the aspects of yourself you've rejected or denied. It's like heating raw ore to separate the metal from the dross. The heat of conscious awareness separates what's real about you from what's just conditioning. Then comes albedo, the whitening phase. This is purification and integration. You've seen your patterns, now you learn to work with them consciously. Instead of being run by your emotions, you learn to feel them fully while choosing your response. Instead of believing every thought, you recognize thoughts as mental events you can observe. You start integrating the rejected parts of yourself, reclaiming energy that was locked up in internal conflict. Finally, rubedo, the reddening phase. This is the achievement of unified, illuminated awareness. You're no longer split between conscious and unconscious, between what you accept about yourself and what you reject. You've become whole, integrated, fully conscious. This is the philosopher's stone, not a physical object, but a state of consciousness that can transmute any experience. Here's how this works practically. Take negative emotions, anger, fear, sadness. In ordinary consciousness, you're either overwhelmed by them or trying to suppress them. But apply alchemical principles, and you can transmute them into wisdom. Anger contains information about your boundaries and values. Fear shows you what matters to you. Sadness connects you to what you've lost or what you're longing for. When you stop fighting these emotions and start extracting their essence, they become allies rather than enemies. The same principle applies to limiting beliefs. Instead of trying to positive think your way past them, you can use the alchemical process. First, you make the unconscious belief conscious, that's nigredo. Then you examine it, question it, understand where it came from, that's albedo. Finally, you extract whatever wisdom it contains while releasing its limiting power, that's rubedo. Life challenges work the same way. What seems like lead, difficult relationships, career setbacks, health issues, contains gold when you know how to extract it. Every challenge forces growth, reveals strength you didn't know you had, teaches lessons you couldn't learn any other way. The alchemist doesn't avoid difficulty, they use it as raw material for transformation. The Hermetic texts describe specific techniques for this consciousness transmutation. Remember the principle of polarity from earlier. You can use this to shift states by finding the opposite pole of any unwanted experience. Feeling powerless? Connect with times you felt empowered. The same mental faculty that creates one can create the other. The principle of rhythm helps you time your transformations. Instead of fighting against natural cycles, you work with them. There are times for action and times for reflection, times for expansion and times for consolidation. Master alchemists learn to sense these rhythms and align their inner work accordingly. The principle of correspondence lets you work on multiple levels simultaneously. Change your posture and breathing, and you change your emotional state. Change your emotional state, and you change your mental clarity. Change your mental clarity, and you change your spiritual awareness. Everything is connected. True alchemy involves becoming conscious of the unconscious patterns that usually direct you, then learning to direct those forces yourself. Instead of being lived by your conditioning, you start living consciously. Instead of reacting automatically, you respond with awareness. Instead of being a victim of circumstances, you become an active participant in your own transformation. This creates what the texts call the philosopher's stone, a state of consciousness that can transmute any experience. You develop the ability to find gold in any situation, to extract wisdom from any challenge, to maintain your center regardless of external circumstances. Now you understand why this knowledge was suppressed. It teaches people to transform themselves rather than seeking external solutions or authorities. It makes individuals psychologically and spiritually self-sufficient. It creates people who can't be easily controlled because they've learned to control themselves. The real alchemy isn't happening in some medieval laboratory. It's happening right now, in your consciousness. Every time you choose awareness over automaticity, every time you transform a limiting pattern into an empowering one, every time you find the gold hidden in life's lead. Now we arrive at the ultimate purpose of Hermetic wisdom, becoming a conscious creator of your reality. This isn't about wishful thinking or positive affirmations. This is about understanding the precise mechanics of how consciousness shapes experience and learning to operate those mechanisms deliberately. Think about where we've traveled together. The principle of mentalism revealed that reality itself is mental in nature, responsive to consciousness like clay in the hands of a sculptor. Correspondence showed us that inner changes inevitably create outer changes, that your external world mirrors your internal state with mathematical precision. Vibration gave us the actual mechanism of attraction, explaining how matching frequencies draw experiences to us. Polarity provided the tools for transformation, showing how to transmute unwanted states into their opposites. Rhythm taught us about optimal timing, helping us work with natural cycles rather than against them. Cause and effect demonstrated our absolute responsibility as creators, proving that nothing happens to us by accident. And gender revealed the necessity of balancing receptive and active qualities in the creative process. These aren't separate techniques you apply randomly. They function as an integrated system, each principle supporting and amplifying the others. When you understand this integration, you stop being a victim of circumstances and become a deliberate architect of experience. Here's how this actually works in practice. Start by honestly assessing your current reality as a perfect reflection of your consciousness. Your relationships, your financial situation, your health, your opportunities. Everything exists as an external mirror of your internal patterns. This isn't judgment, it's recognition. If you're experiencing limitation, conflict, or dissatisfaction in any area, that experience is showing you exactly what's operating in your consciousness. Next, identify the specific mental and emotional patterns creating unwanted experiences. Most people skip this crucial step because it requires brutal honesty. You might discover that your financial struggles correlate with deep beliefs about unworthiness. Your relationship conflicts might reflect internal battles between different aspects of yourself. Your health challenges could mirror emotional states you've been carrying for years. The Hermetic practitioner learns to read these correspondences like a diagnostic system. Once you've identified the patterns, you use polarity and vibration to shift them. Remember, every unwanted state contains its opposite. Fear contains courage, lack contains abundance, conflict contains harmony. But you can't just think your way to the opposite pole, you must feel your way there. This is where vibration becomes crucial. You literally tune your emotional frequency to match what you want to experience. When someone tells you to raise your vibration, this is the actual mechanism they're referencing. Here's where most people stumble. They try to force immediate external changes instead of working with correspondence and rhythm to amplify their internal shifts. Real transformation follows natural cycles. You plant seeds of new patterns through consistent internal work, tend them through daily practice, and harvest the results when the timing aligns. Fighting against this rhythm creates resistance and delays manifestation. The biggest obstacle you'll face is your own conditioning fighting against conscious creation. Your unconscious programming will generate thoughts, emotions, and even circumstances designed to pull you back into familiar patterns. This isn't failure, it's the natural resistance that occurs when you attempt to break free from mechanical living. Work with this resistance instead of against it. When old patterns surface, don't judge them or try to suppress them. Recognize them as opportunities to practice your understanding of polarity. Each moment of resistance becomes a chance to consciously choose a different response, gradually building new neural pathways and energetic patterns. Maintaining faith in the process when external changes appear delayed requires understanding the lag time between inner shifts and outer manifestations. Just as planted seeds don't immediately produce fruit, consciousness changes need time to reorganize physical reality. During this gestation period, your commitment to the new patterns determines whether the changes take root or abort. This knowledge comes with profound responsibility. Once you understand these principles, you can no longer claim victimhood. Every experience becomes your creation, either conscious or unconscious. This includes your impact on others. Your consciousness affects everyone in your environment through the same mechanisms that shape your personal reality. This represents the ultimate liberation described in Hermetic texts, freedom from unconscious reaction and the ability to consciously participate in reality creation. Instead of being tossed around by circumstances, you become a stable center of creative power. Instead of hoping for better conditions, you generate them. Now you understand why this knowledge was considered dangerous. People who truly grasp these principles cannot be manipulated or disempowered. They cannot be convinced that they're victims of forces beyond their control. They cannot be sold solutions to problems they know they have the power to solve themselves. They become ungovernable in the deepest sense, not rebellious or antisocial, but simply operating from their own center of creative authority. This threatens any system built on keeping people dependent, fearful, or convinced of their powerlessness. A population that understands Hermetic principles would transform society overnight, not through revolution but through the simple act of conscious individuals creating conscious realities. This isn't about believing in magic, it's about understanding the natural laws that govern the relationship between consciousness and experience. These laws operate whether you believe in them or not, just like gravity. The difference is that conscious knowledge allows you to work with them deliberately instead of being unconsciously subject to them. Your reality is not happening to you, it's happening through you. Every moment offers a choice. Remain unconscious and mechanical, or step into your role as a deliberate creator. The Hermetic texts were preserved through centuries of suppression so that you could have this choice. The question isn't whether these principles work, they're working right now, creating your current experience. The question is whether you'll learn to operate them consciously or continue letting them run automatically based on inherited programming and unconscious patterns. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."